David, we've got the clock ticking right till the end of September before there's got to be some kind of continuing resolution passed, or else some parts of the government may shut down. And I think it's safe to say everybody would like to avoid that before the November elections, because voters pretty much hate that. So what are some of the obstacles that you see that might be in the way of getting a continuing resolution passed?
Yeah, it's interesting because you'd think just a simple stopgap measure, which is all that is, to extend current funding just to buy them a little more time, would not be a heavy lift. You'd think they could just pass that quickly, but no, it's a heavy lift. We've seen time and again that even when they think it would be simple, it ends up being this major chore that because they know it's a must-pass bill, and so then both parties try to exert leverage to attach other measures to it that they want to see passed quickly. And so then they have to bargain over those items just to get a deal to pass a stopgap, a CR. And this year, I think there are at least two things that come to mind that could trip them up. One, of course, relates to this Build Back Better Inflation Reduction Act package that just passed. Remember that there was that big climate change spending package in there, and to get a deal with Joe Manchin, the pivotal swing vote in the Senate on that package,
From coal country, I might add.
From coal country in West Virginia, he got an agreement with Democratic leaders to have a vote on legislation to overhaul federal permitting to make some of these energy projects get built more quickly, particularly when it comes to, say, pipelines that he likes. And so the question now is, well, how do they pass permitting legislation and guarantee him a vote on that? Well, you've got a 50-50 Senate, and you've got we've already seen a lot of pushback from House progressives anyway, saying they're not very keen on this idea, of course, because they want more time for environmental reviews and whatnot. And so it's going to be a chore to pass any kind of permitting legislation. And so the question then is, well, maybe the most obvious place to pass permitting legislation would be to attach it to this stopgap funding measure, right? So that, and I think Manchin has just said the other day at the White House that he envisions the CR as the place to get that done. And so then the question is, does that tie up the CR even more, make it more complicated? Because they would have to fine tune the language of permitting legislation in order to just pass the stopgap and avoid a government shutdown. And then there's one other obstacle that I see looming potentially, which is we haven't talked about it in a while now, but there's a pandemic going on, and the White House last March requested a supplemental funding package for COVID for more vaccines and therapeutics and testing that they say was running low. Plus, there's a concern we need to prepare for the next variant of the virus that comes along. The administration had requested over $22 billion in emergency funding for that back in March. Here we are in August. Still no funding. They had come close, to a deal on COVID funding. A couple months ago, the Senate reached a bipartisan deal even on something like $10 billion for COVID. And then it blew up in their face because right at that time, the administration announced a decision relating to immigration, that so-called Title 42 measure. We don't have to get into it, but it was extending that it had to do with barring migrants from the border, even if they were applying for asylum because of the pandemic. And Biden folks were trying to lift that restriction, and Republicans just blew up. They were irate about it. They said, if you don't think COVID is a crisis at the border anymore, then why is COVID a crisis at home? No, we don't think we need this extra COVID money anymore. So, the whole thing blew up. It's still hanging out there. Is there going to be more COVID funding, right? And so another place they could get COVID funding passed is on this CR, Democrats. So Republicans are resistant, and they say there should be enough money out there they can reprogram without needing new money. That's debatable. The administration already did some of that reprogramming. But if they want more, a logical place to get it done would be on this CR. And so that opens up a whole other can of worms over how much more COVID money is needed and under what conditions, and can they attach it? So even a simple stopgap is not so simple.